Welcome, everyone. Simon Rosenberg, Hopium Chronicles, back with a great event. We are joined today by Attorney General Nessel from Michigan, part of our ongoing series of interviews and discussions with the Democratic Attorneys General who are doing their part to maintain our constitutional order in America. Welcome, Attorney General Nessel.
Thanks for having me.
So listen, we have launched a series interviewing your colleagues, and we've heard about the collective work that you meet on a regular basis, that you began this organization together a year before Donald Trump came into office. Can you just review, now that you've launched so many suits, you've had so many victories, just review for us how you think this has gone? Has this exceeded your expectations? Talk about the things that you're most proud of. This is a big story of how the fight to preserve our democracy that I think isn't being adequately told in the national media. So I think people would be really interested in getting your perspective on what you've been able to do.
Yeah, well, I can't speak for other offices that are statewide offices that work with other statewide offices, but I can say this. I think that the Democratic Attorneys General just have a remarkable relationship that's built on trust and respect and collegiality. And we really needed it this time around. Last time I was here and I ran in part to become Attorney General in the face of incredible trespasses against, our state residents here in Michigan by the first Trump administration. So I ran in large part on that. I joined in, led some national litigation that was multi-state in nature, had some big victories. And we saw, I think, the impact that we could all have working together and, how much more we could do working together than working in individual silos. But, what we also knew is, in the event that Trump was reelected to office, that things were going to be a million times worse than they were the first time around. Yeah. And in fact, they had a plan, right? They had Project 2025. So we could sit and we could go through that document, that lengthy document, and we could try our best to predict what the Trump administration would do. And we have been successful in many of these cases in being prepared for it. Now, we couldn't prepare for everything. There's a lot of things that were not written anywhere. And I will give you a few examples of very serious, important cases that we had no idea were coming. One of the most impactful, the lawsuit against the Office of Management and Budget, where the acting director, one night says, by the way, I'm going to defund every single one of your state programs that is administered by the federal government. All of them, Medicaid and Head Start and Meals on Wheels and our FEMA funding. And the list goes on. And we had no idea it was coming. All 23 Democratic AGs had to file a lawsuit within 24 hours, which is amazing that we could all do that and put that together. Within a couple hours of its filing, we had a temporary restraining order where a court said, absolutely not, Trump administration. You are going to lift the pause and begin to, refund these programs. And then eventually they just dropped it. They're like, our bad, never mind. But that was billions and billions of dollars into each of our states. It was a remarkable turn of events in that the federal government would even try to do something this outrageous and unconstitutional. All that money had been appropriated by Congress to our states. P.S. That's our money. Our states, we paid money to the federal government for the purposes of having it appropriated back to us in the way of this programming. And without warning, without being able to tell any of our participants in those programs, without telling our state agencies, without telling even the federal agencies who administer the program, they just all at once shut off the funding. But that would have been devastating to all of our states. But we won that case and we did it very, very quickly. One of the cases that I'm very proud of that Michigan was a lead on involved the first NIH case where the National Institute of Health on Friday evening, there was a memo that went out, said we are going to significantly reduce the amount of these grants that have been, by the way, negotiated by the federal government. And in a state like mine, where we have, a lot of major universities that are doing medical research and medical treatment, and a lot of healthcare systems, they're doing the same, literally keeping people alive through these experimental programs. You know, they they said, on a Friday evening, Monday morning, we're going to reduce the funding so dramatically that you'll have to shut down practically all of your research programming. And again, we had a lawsuit ready to go on that Monday morning. A few hours later, judges issued a TRO and said, you need to restart that funding. So, it's sort of this common theme in that the Trump administration does something incredibly brazen, incredibly harmful to Democrats and Republicans alike. It's not like,
Yeah.
do Republicans not get cancer? Do Republicans not suffer from Alzheimer's or dementia? If anything, I think what we've seen from the White House is yes, Republicans do get dementia and Alzheimer's. But but that being the case, you know, just things that no former president would even have thought of doing some of these things. But there's nothing that's too brazenly illegal or unconstitutional for the Trump administration to try it. And if they lose, they lose. They don't really seem to care. But I'm really grateful to have this coalition. None of us as individual states could do it on our own. But the other thing I want to mention that I think has been very interesting to me is, of course, the Republican AGs have not participated in any of our litigation,
Yeah.
even though they have people who are on in Head Start or part of, participate in Medicaid or Meals on Wheels. They get FEMA funding in those states, right? They have NIH programming in, Kansas and Missouri and Florida and Texas. And what we're beginning to see is that the federal courts, and this is the subject matter of the birthrights lawsuit, which is currently pending in the United States Supreme Court, they're starting to say, hey, the only states that will get relief from these TROs or from these preliminary injunctions are the states that participated in the litigation. And so my question is to those Republican AGs is, who do you represent? Do you
Right.
represent that guy in the White House and your feigned, unyielding loyalty to him? Or do you represent the people of your states who elected you to be attorney general? And I just don't get it. I don't understand it at all. For me, I got to do what's best for my state residents first and foremost. They're the ones who elected me to office, not somebody in the White House.
Well, you raise so many issues. And first of all, again, congratulations on your incredible success over the last few months. And it's a delight to be able to share this with our community. Is that first, the complicity of Republicans in Congress and the attorney generals and the governors who have abandoned their constituents again and again and again. It's really a very remarkable part of this story in these early days of Trump. And then the second thing is that you pointed out that that we have not that there were things that people couldn't anticipate, right? And that they are sort of throwing everything against the wall. And I think part of their theory is, look, if we win, if we lose 50, 60, 70% of these cases, we still get 40, 30, 40, 50% through, right? And they have been operating with such incredible aggression and inhumanity. I mean, that's the thing that the NIH funding that you're talking about is that people die because of this. I mean, just the lack of concern of everyday people there, and is become the hallmark of this early Trump era. And whether it's the Medicaid cuts that are being, contemplated in the big ugly bill that they're doing, or the USAID cuts that are causing hundreds of thousands of people to die around the world, that there is a level of inhumanity and lack of concern for the health and welfare of everyday people that is a little bit breathtaking and overwhelming at times.
Simon, if you don't mind me mentioning one case in particular that
Yeah.
scares the daylights out of me, and I can remember doing a number of state interviews about this case when we filed it, and almost having a panic attack as I was describing it, because the more I learned about it, the more I talked about it, the more I felt so helpless. But it's what RFK Jr. has done in decimating DHHS. And I want to talk specifically about how many CDC labs across the United States have been shut down so that they're not doing basic testing, testing for things like Ebola or measles or bird flu, or even for things that involve local health departments, that trickles down to them, involving things like, Legionella disease, or E. coli, or just basic things that you might find in your food or your water, and certainly infectious diseases that spread like wildfire. And I know that our next global pandemic is just around the corner if we're not testing for it, if you don't have a federal agency that is communicating between the states, because something could be happening in Vermont right now, but I can't protect the people of Michigan, if we don't
Right.
know that if there's no coordination between those states, because it's not Vermont's job to talk to Michigan or Georgia, or Mississippi. And this could happen overnight. And the thing that I don't understand is, I don't care how rich you are, you could be a multi-billionaire. I don't care how much privilege you have that comes with that money, or any other qualities you might have. I don't care how well connected you are to the Trump administration. You're going to die when you get Ebola, most likely. I mean, it's, when you get into, an aircraft, and we have decimated the FAA, and NOAA, and other things that we need to make sure we know what the weather is. We know from our air traffic controllers what planes are coming and going at whatever time. You're still going to die in that plane. It's not segregated. There aren't just like Democrats get into these planes, Republicans get into these planes, and we'll protect the ones we want. So I just don't understand how people can, how their partisanship in any way impacts things like public health, or travel, or so many other things that we depend on just to stay alive. It's bewildering to me. I don't understand it now, and I don't know that I ever will.
Listen, it is, we've launched a campaign at Hopium to stand up for science. And we've been, I live in the DC area, and it's hard to even put into words what it means to have the NIH gutted, and, HHS, as you've pointed out, and the impact on our public health. The New York Times had a remarkable story that, if you didn't get to it yet, this weekend, which was titled, "I Feel Like I've Been Lied To." And it was about a chiropractor in West Texas who got measles, and he's 48 years old. He almost died from measles. And that measles in his community has come back and raging. And he has 4 kids who are unvaccinated. And his conclusion from having almost died from measles was that, "I feel like I've been lied to," is the headline. And that, to me, is going to potentially become the anthem of the Trump era, right? That, we've all been lied to. But you're right that I think that in all the work that I do, and I've been in Washington for 33 years, fighting it out in politics, the stuff that's happening with our public health is the most overwhelming. And in terms of, it feels like sabotage as opposed to public policy. And, we often describe Trump's agenda as one of being sabotage, plunder, and betrayal, is the 3 words that we use. And there's no place where that all feels like that than in what's happening with our healthcare system and their abandonment of it. I think Democrats have a lot more running room here on these issues than we've been able to take advantage of. I mean, we're talking, I think, very effectively about Medicaid and Medicare, but I think there's a broader assault on our public health that needs to become more central to what we're talking about with the American people.
I think it's not, when you have to speculate as to like what sort of philosophy does this fit into. I think it's just outright nihilism. My speculation is that maybe there are people who are close to the president that are just literally trying to bring on the rapture as quickly as they can, and this is the best way to do it. And I'm not being facetious, because I can't figure out any other reason why you wouldn't protect people's public health in ways that we know are effective, and we know have worked so well over the course of many years. And we know that the United States has played a pivotal role in. I'm not sure, without the United States, even if everyone in Asia and Africa and Europe and South America and Central America, they could all be doing the best they possibly can with the resources they have. And I don't know that they can keep us safe absent the United States participation.
Yeah, listen, I spoke at an event last night, and I said, the vaccine regime in America is, the global vaccine regime is the most successful scientific achievement probably in human history. And, they're trying to unravel it now. And it's terrifying. How is all this playing back home? I mean, you're, in a state, battleground state, do you think that the sort of the sabotage, the nature of the regime is starting to be understood and felt back home?
Well, it's so hard to say. I mean, I feel like we all live in our little silos now, and we are also in information silos. So we're all being fed different types of information. And I think for the Trump acolytes, the ones that really buy in to everything he does, and he can do no wrong, and he can change his mind on a dime, as we saw, I think, just yesterday on the regime change. Like, we're not doing that. And then 5 minutes later, oh yeah, now we are doing that. And now everybody's got to be on board with whatever it is that you said, even if it's, completely different than what you said 5 minutes earlier. So for those folks, I just think that, he's like a godlike, construction to them. And anything he says, well, he's a benevolent overlord who just wants what's best for me. And anything he says is right. Those folks, I don't know that we'll ever be able that, it's, you'll have to find a way to cleanse them of some of these very erroneous beliefs. And again, I'm not talking about that from a sociological standpoint. I mean from a scientific standpoint.
Yeah.
But with people, I hope, who are independents or whatever is left of the more moderate Republicans, whatever like Lisa Murkowski's exist somewhere else on the planet. Yeah, I think they already are deeply troubled. But I think what it's going to take is for as many people as possible to be impacted. So when we have, sadly, it'll be too late, when we have another global pandemic, when we have, I mean, let's see what happens. I haven't been watching the news since this morning, so I don't know what's happened to gas prices. But when you see that not only is nothing cheaper, everything's far more expensive than it was. I remember this story about, it was very early on in the Trump presidency. So shortly after January 20th, which now seems like 7 lifetimes ago to me, but it was a park ranger in Michigan who said that she only voted for Trump because she was told she'd get free IVF treatments. And so, but she ended up losing her job like a week later because he laid off so many of our park rangers, irrespective of the fact that that's how we make money here in Michigan. People like to go to our national parks. They love them. For every dollar you put in, you get like $5 out economically. But she just said, like, I really thought he meant it when he said that. And again, my message has been Trump is not a good faith actor. You cannot rely on him to keep his promises, even if he really genuinely wanted to, which I don't subscribe to. I don't think he knows how to do it anyway. So, I don't know. I hope that people see the work we're doing. I mean, we have the numbers, right? Here, we've only paid out an extra $5,500 in costs to the Department of Attorney General. And that's all our pro hoc vici filing motions that you have to pay a motion fee on. We have saved the state concretely, specifically, $1.5 billion. And that's money that was supposed to come to our federal agencies, was supposed to come to our nonprofits, supposed to go to our independent school districts. So I think it's much more than that. But if you had to put a figure on it, it is minimally, at the very least, $1.5 billion that we've saved the state of Michigan in exchange for the $5,500 we spent on filing fees. So I don't know. I mean, maybe there are people out there that are mad at me for it. I see that whenever I'm on X, apparently there are some people that are mad about it. But you know what? I feel like I'm doing the job that I best can to protect and defend the rights of the people of the state of Michigan. And that's what I'm going to keep doing until I'm not in this office any longer.
Any final thoughts for you before we go? Is there anything we didn't cover today or anything that you're really excited about that's coming up in your work?
Well, excited is maybe not the right phrase.
Looking forward to, perhaps.
You know what? I have to say that, I feel very strongly about the cases we filed. Out of we filed 18 cases that are part of multi-state actions. Plus, we have another action involving an order from the Secretary of Energy to keep a coal plant open, despite the fact that it was scheduled to be decommissioned. So that's 19 actions, I guess you would say. 10 of them we've received preliminary injunctive relief, and in a few of those cases, the Trump administration just decided to go ahead and just They revoked whatever the action was. So we are having great success. We've not lost any of these cases yet at all. So, I think we're going to continue to win our cases. But at some point, and this time has already come, obviously, the Trump administration is just not going to abide by court orders. They've pretty much said as much. Um, and I think it's incumbent upon all of us, even if you are a MAGA Trump supporting Republican, I mean, please do your best. Every single one of these actions, think to yourself, well, how would have I reacted if Biden had done this? How would I have reacted if Obama did this? And if the answer is I would be outraged, then you should be outraged right now. You should be outraged irrespective of who is in the White House if they're engaging in brazenly illegal, unconstitutional acts. And until people can wake up and sort of have that sort of recognition, um, and come to terms with the fact that no president of the United States should be engaging in this kind of reckless and illegal behavior, I think it's going to be a real struggle for us. But the Democratic attorneys general are going to keep plowing forward irrespective.
Well, listen, I think thank you so much for this interview, for your incredible work. And I'll just end with one thing that I always say when on the issue of the court orders, is that, we've gotten a lot of polling in the last few months. And the issue that has polled the worst, the single worst of all the issues, was on the question of whether he can ignore court orders. It's only 19% of people believe that would be okay. And I think it's a reason why they've at least pretended as if they are obeying court orders when we know they haven't actually obeyed the Supreme Court orders, for example, right? But they're clearly nervous about this. They see the backlash. And I think that as we've seen with the immigration enforcement actions and the sort of the backlash against that, the muscle memory of our democracy is very deep in this country. And I think we have to be, I feel, sanguine that the resistance and the opposition to him has been more successful, I think, than they anticipated. And it's in part to a great degree because of the work that all of you are doing. And so thank you so much for this great work. Thanks for coming on today. Keep fighting for the great state of Michigan, and let us know what we can do to help you.
Thanks for having me. Much appreciated.
Bye-bye.